And and welcome to episode 35 of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. On quite a packed programme tonight, what I'm going to be talking about is I'm going to be talking about a shoot I did for sculptor Jeff Forrest. On top of that, I'm going to be talking next week. I'm going to be doing another challenge for you. We did the rain challenge, so I've got another one for you for next week. I will talk about that a little bit later on. Then in the critique section, VG was wanting to know about she's actually been trying to photograph a particular ritual celebration happening in India. Karthigai, I think it's pronounced. I'll come back to that. She has written it out phonetically for me. Then Stacey took a photo of bridge she's photographed before and was wanting a bit of help with the crop. Lucas has created took this photo but felt that it wasn't sharp enough, and when you get in on the details you can sort of see it's sort of not quite focused as he wanted. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can sharpen up your images. Anne did this conversion to black and white but felt that it was sort of came out a bit flat. It didn't really capture the depth of her original image. So part of what we're going to be talking about as well is the different ways that you can convert to black and white and how that can make a difference in depth and contrast and what's going on. Then we've also got and moving into very, very dangerous territory, Cliff sent me this photo of his wife and wanted me to give critique on that. Critique a man's photo of his wife. That's going to be fun. So I hope I don't put my foot in too much. Right, so that's where we're going to be starting tonight. So just to let you know, as well, you know full well you're sitting here watching live on Facebook now, or you're watching the recording, which might still be on Facebook, or you might be watching it on YouTube. As you'll notice, youtube.com/Kim Ayres. I record these and then usually, I record them as they're going out live on every Tuesday night, and on the Wednesday I've usually got them up on YouTube. So if you miss this, or you miss parts of it, or you want to sort of rewind, or you've only come in at the beginning and then have to rush off, you can always catch them up on YouTube afterwards. But because I'm doing them live, whilst you can sit and watch the catch-up, I think it's more fun to do it live. If you're doing it on the catch-up, the tendency is to kind of flick through this bit and fast forward through that bit and what have you. And I think you miss all the bits that I screw up as I go. But there's also the chat, and so I can already see a couple of people have started to leave some comments. And this is where I think, for me, a huge part of the fun of these podcasts are. I mean, week 35, this has been going for over 7 months, 7.5, almost 8 months now. And I think the most enjoyable growth part of this has been in the comments. When I started out, I kind of almost didn't realise people could comment, or it was pretty rare. But now people do, and it's great. So I check in the comments every now and again. I don't keep them open all the time because then I tend to kind of get distracted by them, but I do check in. So let's just see who is in here. So Stacey, good afternoon. Kim and Maggie. Hi Stacey, glad you could make it along. Stacey's from Pennsylvania in the US. Maggie, good evening everyone. The first day of winter here. Yeah, well, that's my wife for next door in the kitchen at the moment. And yeah, 1st of December. As that's going out. Happy December, everyone. Robert and Anne, howdy from Texas. Glad you could make it along. It's Anne's picture of the creek, which we'll be looking at a bit later. Becca says, good evening all. Hi, Becca. Glad you could make it. Stacey says, still fall here. 1st day of December and cold. Yeah, fall or autumn and December and winter, so much depends on where you are in the world. I saw somebody shoving up on Facebook earlier today, snowstorms happening in their corner of America. So, yeah. Cliff, good evening, Kim, and everyone else from a chilly Norfolk. Oh, glad you could make it along, Cliff. Yeah, that'll be fun. Kazia, hello, Kim and everyone. Good to see you again, Kazia. Right. What did we get? Oh, VG, good evening. Hi, VG. VG's from India, and which is currently about 1 o'clock in the morning and 5.5 hours ahead of the UK. Whereas our American friends, it's either sort of early to mid-afternoon, I think. And we've got Born Cynic. Hello, everyone. Hello, Kim. Thanks for the invite. Nuija. Now, you'll have to let me know, maybe spell it out phonetically if I'm not saying, is it Nuija, Nuigi, Nuija? Let me know how to pronounce that one. Lucas, good evening. I'm glad you could make it, Lucas. Mandy's here with good evening. Hi, Mandy. William Hiddleston, good evening. Hi, William. And Jill Harrison from Yorkshire. Hi, Jill. Glad you could make it along. VG said, oh, Carthagai. Perfect, Kim. Okay, well, good. I got that one right. Right, we've got, Rosie's here. Hi, Kim, and everyone from the Isle of Whithorn. Hi, Rosie. Glad you could make it along. VG says, watching fun is live. I don't want to miss out. Well, it's great that you make it along, VG. Maya says, hello. Good to see you. Oh, that's great. That's Maya. Maya's from Israel, I think. And then Mick McGunn. Michelle. Right, okay. Greetings, Kim, from a blustery Nova Scotia, or Nova People for Ecological Forestry in southwest Nova Scotia. That's quite a big mouthful there, Michelle. Glad you made it. Cool. Well, that's a good turnout. That's great. That is. Yeah, it's good to see it coming along. Okay. Right. So, here we are, a few minutes in, and we've got plenty of people here, so this is good. Comments are flowing, and by the look of it, some of the comments among each other as well, as people are saying, hi, Jill says, hi, Rosie, please, I could join this week. So, Rosie's been inviting people. Jill, I can't remember, were you last time here, Jill? Can't remember. Anyway. Yes, I mean, another good point. If you're enjoying these things, invite your friends along, Yeah, the more the merrier. We want to build this community. Okay, so what a good start. So what I can say, I will come back to the comments as we go, and so keep commenting, and we'll check in. So first thing I want to talk about is this week I want to sort of talk a wee bit about Jeff Forrest. Now, when I met Jeff Forrest, he used the title Willow Weaver, and in fact, I think he even has that still on his Facebook page, is Jeff Forrest Willow Weaver. But whilst the first time I saw it, the first photo shoots I did for him were very much Willow. He's sort of grown and developed and shot off on different angles and developed, and now really I think you could just call him more of a sculptor than a weaver. I think he's, up until COVID at any rate, he was still running Willow workshops and what have you. But I think it was 2012. It looks like he's dated the first time I did a shoot for him. Basically, at that time, he was doing basket. I'll show you a couple of the kind of things that he was doing. So I mean, here you can see he's sort of weaved this wonderful platter. And baskets also. He used to do these wonderful baskets with these fantastic gnarled pieces of wood to use as a handle. So much nicer and more interesting than string or just a kind of standard and bowed handle. And so he came to me and asked me to sort of start doing photography of his work. And then pretty much every year since, he's kind of come back to me to do more work. And what's been interesting for me is, you see, I don't think of myself as a product photographer. I'm a people photographer, I'm a portrait photographer first and foremost. And product is one of these things I know about, but it's not really my speciality. But Jeff always had a lot of a lot of faith in me, and he keeps coming back to me, and we build up a lovely relationship. He's a really warm, lovely guy. And what's been interesting for me is it's pushed my photography. It's pushed my photography in realms that I wouldn't probably have gone to otherwise. When we started off, I was very much sort of doing, shooting against the white background, just kind of creating, sort of standard studios type shots. But after a couple of years of doing this, we were talking. He'd got another set of baskets, and we talked about the idea of moving out of the studio. And I can't remember who now it was, but he showed me the work of somebody who was sort of doing product photography down on the beach. So we thought, oh, okay, well, let's do that then. So we bundled everything up, threw them in the cars, and went down to the beach. And and then I did a few sort of shots like this, where what you're doing is I'm using the zoom lens. What's my settings on that? I'm at a 2.8 aperture for anybody who's interested. Very wide aperture, and the wide aperture gives you this shallow depth of focus. So as you can see, the basket is in focus, the foreground is a little bit out of focus, and the background's very out of focus. So you only end up with a wide aperture, you end up with this narrow depth of focus. And was doing that with a 200mm lens. So I've got my zoom lens, my 70-200. So I'm lying back on the ground several feet away, and I've zoomed in. And using a zoom lens makes that depth of focus even narrower. And then I did a similar thing with this one as well. I think as the settings on that, I got up to 3.5. And not quite so zoomed in, pulled back a little bit, and then this way you can see a bit more of the background. So you can tell the rocks, but you can also see the water, and you can see the hills beyond on the other side of the estuary. So that sort, and then we've done other shoots where we've taken other baskets, gone down to beaches. We did a shoot last year or the year before, where he got these blue, he painted them blue, and we did them against white shells, creating a particular look. Then he's also played with clay and ceramics and creating bits and pieces with that as well. And I remember when he showed me these, and trying to think, well, how would I sort of shoot these? So he created these bowls and forms. And this one in particular, the way we talked, I thought, okay, you wanted it on some kind of wooden, like almost a wooden bench or wooden shelving with a nice old whitewashed stone wall next to it. And I realised that actually there was a place in our house, well, this is where I took these, but there's only one place in the house that looks anything like that, where this was taken, and that's on a landing where you come down some stairs. There's a little bit of landing, about, 3 foot wide, 5 foot long. You can go off one side to the bathroom, and then you go down the stairs. And so the light here, I've got the light coming from the bathroom door. I've stuck a big softbox in the doorway to try and make it look like natural light coming through a window. But in order to get this shot, I'm essentially lying upside down on the stairs, so that this is the only way I could actually fit to get my head down at ground level, specifically for this one, where I'm only a couple of inches above the ground. I couldn't do it just squatting down, and there wasn't room to lie across, and I couldn't do it coming up the stairs, because then that faced a different wall which didn't have the stonework. So the only way I could do it was literally lying down the stairs upside down. I can't remember whether I ever told Jeff just how damn complicated it was to get these shots, but he was happy with them, which was lovely. Then a couple of years ago, there's an event called Spring Fling I've talked about before. For those who are sort of relatively new to this, Spring Fling is an event in southwest Scotland where every year, apart from this year, got a bit complicated, had to go online because of COVID. But for the previous sort of 18 years or so, it's where a whole set of artists, up to anything between 80 and 100 artists, open their doors for the last weekend of May. And it's so you can go round, you can visit the studios, you can find artists in their own places or in rented spaces, and and you can buy from them directly, you can talk to them directly, whether you're a buyer or you're a fan, and there's all these trails you can go on, and you never get a chance to go. You circle about 30 or 40 that you want to go and see. You manage to make about 10 across the whole weekend. It's a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Anyway, Jeff it was a couple of years back, and I decided to take a year off Spring Fling. And while I was doing the rounds, I came across Jeff. And Jeff had created these steel hairs. A hair, like as in a rabbit hair, not as in hair on your head. And they were quite amazing. It was the shapes, but they were, essentially hollow, but like sort of, and not even the bones of, but just shapes, which I thought. I immediately turned around to him and said, what you need with that is you want a photo of it on a hill or something with the sun setting behind it. Because of the way the shapes were, I just thought silhouette is really what's going to bring out this kind of thing. And lo and behold, I think it was the following summer. Time has escaped me now, doesn't really matter. The fact was, we then had some really long sunny days, and which is unusual for Scotland. You'll get the odd sunny day. Occasionally you'll get 2 or 3 in a row, but we were actually going through this period, I think it was last year, of where we had 2 or 3 weeks of solid sunshine. And so I thought, well, okay, maybe now's the time to do this. Got in touch with Jeff. He thought it was a great idea. Now, Jeff lives up at Loch Doon, which is roughly about an hour's drive from here up into the Galloway Hills. So I set off late afternoon, early evening, beautiful evening, windows down, music blaring, winding along, empty roads, beautiful drive. Got out there. Unfortunately, I realised where Jeff was actually based, I suddenly realised he was kind of on the edge of a hill and the sun was the other side of the hill, so we couldn't kind of go there. So we had a cup of tea, had a bit of a chat, and then we went to a place a couple of miles up the road where the sun was still out, but timing was now starting to get a bit crucial. Jeff could only, these hairs that he had were roughly about 1 metre high and, similarly long, a bit over 1 metre long, 1 or 2 of them. But he could only fit one in the back of his van at a time. So essentially we drove up, he dropped me off with one, went back, got another, and so on. And time started running out. However, I did just about manage to get in to get the shot. Well, actually, first of all, I'll just show you what one of these looks like. This was kind of a quick shot. This is, you can see here the place we're in. We've got Loch Doon in the background. Got the last rays of the setting sun just catching the edge of this steel hair, and he's got a frame for it, which the whole thing is based on. And you can now see that because of the lines, you can perhaps understand why I thought this would look so good silhouetted against the sun. So I'll show you. Let's do that. So one of the first shots I took, this is where there's upright hairs. Sorry, keep knocking that. And here the sun is off to the left, but it sort of, you can see the way this is constructed, or beautifully put together. I do remember saying to him, well, sort of the leap from willow to steel seemed a really kind of strange, huge one, but he seemed to reckon that actually a lot of the principles were very, very similar, but it was just a change of material, really. But then this was the sort of the first one that I really created that I felt happy with. Now, I've edited out the steel frame that was sitting at the bottom because that just kind of clashed, and it didn't really matter because what it's all about is the shape of the bounding hare. And we just managed to get in the sun as it was starting to disappear. He got back with the second one, and so you can see here then that we've got now I've got the two of them, and we've got that beautiful sort of sunset, and I just really love that kind of silhouette idea of it. And the photos went down well. He had an exhibition, and I think he was using this one as one of the key photos, and he phoned to tell me that at the preview of the exhibition somebody turned up early specifically to buy one of these because they had seen the picture and they just desperately wanted to get it before anybody else got it. So I thought, it's kind of I had a smug moment, but yeah, it did feel good. We went to a lot of effort to get these photos, but it was really good that it was doing the job that it was, the job that it was setting out to was to sell his work, to promote his work. Now, the problem is whilst it was a beautiful, beautiful evening with beautiful, beautiful light, even though the light was disappearing, we're in Scotland, we're by a loch, and it wasn't very windy. And this means midges. And for those who don't know about midges, think mosquitoes, but smaller and more vicious. And you get swarms of them, especially by the water, especially in Scotland, by the loch. Now, we were a little bit away from the loch here, but what I was aware of was as the sun was disappearing, I thought, well, actually, we're not going to make it completely, but because as the sun disappeared, I thought if we got down to the edge of the loch and then looked back up, we should get the kind of afterglow of the sun. And the afterglow of the sun would then be reflecting on the water. There was a little kind of bit jetting out into the loch, and I thought if we could get down to there. So we picked up one of the hares and went down and wound our way down to the loch. And here you can see we took, I took this photo. So we've got the beautiful afterglow. We've still got the silhouette. Now, where I took this, I was quite pleased with this, except for the fact that you become aware of the fact that the silhouette you can't really see the metal in the middle. So I pulled out an off-camera flash, set it up, and then by this time it's getting even darker by the time I've got the lighting right. And for this version, we've still got all the sun glow behind and reflecting, but now I'm lighting up the metal as well, so you can see the sort of 3D nature of the metal much more, rather than just and of course you can see it through where the bit of land is in the background as well. So these were the ones that we created. Now at this point we'd taken the one hare down. I mean, they're a metre big, they're quite heavy. The original plan had been to go back, get a second one and bring it down. But oh my God, the midges. I mean, the cloud absolutely. Now, I was covered with citronella. Now, there are all sorts of things people will talk to you about, this kind of covering, that kind, a dove, I think, do some kind of skin so kind or whatever, which apparently, the army uses a kind of insect repellent. But citronella is brilliant, and I've never been bitten when I've had citronella. However, while they weren't actually biting me, didn't stop them crawling all over me. I mean, it was sort of insects all over the place. And at this point, they're going up the nose and they're going in the ears, and you're kind of blinking them out the eyes. And it was hell. I mean, you can see how beautiful the light is. And as every bone in my photographer body desperately wanted to take more photos, but we couldn't. We ended up just sort of grabbing this and then running like heck back to the van. So yeah, we've decided if we ever do a shoot like this again, it's going to be in midwinter. So just to try and make sure we escape the midges. So that's pretty much the story of Jeff Forrest's The Midges and the Steel Hares. I thought you might be kind of interested. It was my Jeff. We still got plans for when COVID is over. In fact, actually, I was even doing a little bit of photography for him recently. I kind of forgot about this. I'll just show you. It was for small pieces, and he sent me these swallows, swallowtail. I don't know whether you can see this, and got a little bit of string that I was using to hold it, and then sort of create a little backdrop with it. But you can sort of see the way the metal is put together, and the beautiful shapes. You just get these fantastic just curves and the way everything moves together. So yeah, so that's Jeff Forrest, Willow Weaver. I'll stick his web address into the comments or the description. Well worth a visit. Go and take a look at his stuff. Yeah, so thought you might be interested in that. Okay, let's flip back then to the comments and see if we have anything more. I'll just close those windows and open that back up. So, where are we? Oh, got a few here. Stacy says, love the baskets, put silk flowers or give gifts. VG looks beautiful, and in product photography lies a great challenge. Yes. Stacey says she does product photography, but it has to be on a white background, nothing funky, although I love this type. So yeah, the white background is, I think, it's the starting point. And actually, it's the finishing point for a lot of things. I think I even did that swallow against a white background. If you're just showing off the piece, as in like for a catalogue type thing, then white background is as good as it gets. It's kind of expected. But I think it can be quite fun when you do leave the studio, like the baskets on the beach, or these steel hairs at the edge of a loch. How else can you use the light? How can you use the landscape, especially for things which have a very kind of organic feel or natural feel to them? Greg's come in. Sorry, a bit late logging on. Greg, how could you? Missed all the good stuff. Becca says, wow, love simplistic images. Thank you. Brian, good to be with you again. Good to see you back again, Brian. It's been a few weeks, I think, since you last said hi. So I hope everything's okay with you. VG, brilliant hair caught in action. I'm glad you like that. VG, Mandy, fab photo kit. Thank you. Becca says, I thought midges were some mystical creatures when you spoke about them before. Yeah, there's all sorts of mystical creatures in Scotland. I mean, we all know about the haggis as well, where the left legs are longer than the right, so you can run around the side of mountains without falling over. In fact, for those who don't know, the national animal for Scotland is the unicorn. I kid you not. It is the unicorn. Just like for England, you've got a lion rampant. For Scotland, it is in fact the unicorn. So yes, full of mythical creatures up here. Stacey says, late summer the mosquitoes here are like midges when it gets and when it gets hot. I carry natural spray, Avon Skin So Soft. Yeah, it's Avon, not Dove. Yeah, Skin So Soft. That's the one generally recommended. Cliff says, I'd have been perfectly happy with the original silhouette of the hair, but what a difference the added light made. Yeah, well, that was it, Cliff. I took the photo, but then I thought, I need to light it, and well, the midges are crawling over me, and it's that bit of it's that bit of the obsessive photographer. Once you've got an idea, yeah, it's very difficult to let go of. Becca says Norfolk isn't much better. Do you get midges down in Norfolk, or is it the mosquitoes? I suppose you're flat and you've got all the fens and the marshlands and stuff down there, isn't it? Rosie, I wish midges were mythical. Yeah, don't we all? Absolutely. Brilliant. Okay, right, let's move on to the next bit then. So, actually, what I want to say is, next thing is next week. You remember a few weeks ago I did a rain challenge special where, instead of just the usual tell you a bit of a story about, a photo shoot I was doing, giving you background and then going on to do the critique section, we did the rain challenge where, about 17 of you, I think, who put in photos to do with the rain, whether trying to photograph the rain or the effects of the rain or the reactions to the rain. And we had some fantastic photos. We went through them, acted as inspiration for some of you. Some of them were also a bit of critique, where we went through and sort of other ways we could have maybe edited or enhanced or highlighted aspects of the photos. It seemed to, got a lot of really positive feedback from that. A lot of people sort of asking if we could have more of that. So I've decided to pretty much do a kind of monthly challenge, and it's your chance to go and find, to give it a go. To, if you've, maybe you've already got photos sitting in folders which you can dig out, which fit the theme, or maybe you can re-edit them, or maybe you can have a go at shooting something fresh. So the idea is try and get involved with the challenge, take the photos, submit to me one photo, maybe two. If you're doing 3 or 4, it's unlikely that I'll be able to show all of them. A lot depends how many people take part, obviously. The other thing is whilst it's next Tuesday, try and get them to me by the weekend. Last time sort of showed me there was quite a strong response to it. Next Monday the 7th December is really absolutely the latest. If you send me something on Tuesday, there's absolutely no guarantee I'm going to be able to show it. But if you can get them, the earlier the better, and it gives me a chance to then go through, put them in groups, work out the kind of way we can look through them, and also, and at the same time, if you're trying to have a go with this and you run into problems, submit the photo you're having a problem with, tell me what the problem is, and we can still kind of address some of these things as well. So it's an opportunity we can still do some of the critique, address other problems, but it's also a chance to maybe show off a bit, try and create something really interesting, and to inspire and be inspired by others. So that's the idea of the challenge. The challenge, what are we going to talk? The challenge that I'm setting for you for next week then is celebration. 1st of December, obviously in the Western world, Christmas just around the corner. And whilst some people have started, the supermarkets have been selling Christmas stuff for the last 3 months, most people, generally speaking, hold off until December before you start kind of getting the Christmas stuff up. But it's not just Christmas. There's Hanukkah for Hanukkah. Oh God, my pronunciation. Anyway, the Jewish festival. There's all sorts of other midwinter festivals. Solstice time. Well, because it's around the solstice. VG was telling me that pretty much with the Hindu religion, there's festivals pretty much every month. So but it doesn't. Celebration can be festivals, or it can be birthdays, or if you're talking celebration, it can be winning something or achieving something. Celebrate because you passed your driving test. So achievements and as well as festivals. Other ideas are things like and so ways you could take it. You could do. You could do it. You could sort of take photos of people, like a person, or crowds of people. You could do aspects like objects or symbols. There's sort of plenty of different ways. You can do close-ups. You can do wide shots. I was playing earlier today. I'll just show you a photo I was playing because I was thinking I could probably. Having said that, I'm going to need a photo or something to, and I thought, well, with a lot of festivals and celebrations, actually, there's all sorts of lighting candles, lighting fires, and what have you. So I created this photo this afternoon. I'm going to pretty much see VG sitting upright at this point and peering in, partly because part of her photos, which we're going to be talking about later, is also about. Involves flames and light. Now, I will say with this photo that it took a lot of shots to get the photo I wanted. A lot of playing around, a lot of experimentation. And for those who are interested, my camera settings, I've got it at f4, so relatively narrow, but that's given me a wide aperture to let in a bit more light. I've got it sitting by the window with just a piece of black card. In fact, actually, it's not even card, it's my tablet case. My tablet case is black, so I've got that sitting behind it, and I've got the window to the left of it. You can just see it's slightly lighter on the left here. That's window light coming in. And then I got my wife, that's Maggie's hand, to strike the match. And then I put the camera, I'm shooting at 2,000th of a second. I've got it on a high speed burst, so I'm going, and so with my camera that's shooting off about 11 frames a second, and for all that, so I probably ended up taking about 120 photos, and this was the only one I was pleased with. But I do like this one, because what you can see when you're going at that speed, you've got these little sparks coming out from the actual the head of the match is still kind of flaring at this point. The sulfuring kind of going, you can hear it going, and it's not just the flame, it's this, it's the whole kind of chemical reaction going on. I like the shape of the flame too, and the fact that you could see the match head out of it. I focused on the wick, so that's the bit where, and then as Maggie managed and told Maggie to strike the match and immediately take it to where the wick was. And you can also see little puffs of smoke kind of coming up as well. So yeah, 2,000th of a second, ISO 800, f4, and there's natural daylight coming from the left, but when you're doing 2,000th of a second, that's kind of obviously darkening it down a bit as well. So there's an idea, that's a close-up kind of thing, lighting candles, whether it's birthday candles or Christmas candles or tea lights or oil lamps or anything like that, especially because we're kind of into midwinter in the northern hemisphere. There's always lots of light stuff going on. So but like I say, celebration is also, it can be people, it can be wrapping paper, it can be symbols, it can be objects, it can be groups of people, it can, you can be carol singers, or it can just be a single person, or it can be holding up a trophy, or it can be holding up a certificate. So there's lots of options here for celebration. So that's your task for next week. Put together a photo or two of celebration. Put in your best stuff, or if you have run into problems and you think, actually, you know what, I'm struggling with this and I could really do with a bit of advice on it, submit that as well. Put it into the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook page, or alternatively, I'll create an event page on Facebook as well, so when that goes up, you can put it in there. If you are watching this on YouTube because you don't do Facebook, then kim@kimayres.co.uk. So let's just flip back over here. You can see my website there is kimayres.co.uk, and it's just kim@kimayres.co.uk. Email me your image to be included. Likewise, actually, if you are wanting some kind of feedback, it's always quite useful if you can send me a kind of high resolution original JPEG or RAW file, again to kim@kimayres.co.uk. Right, okay, so we're going to do that. So let's flip back and just see if we've got any comments. VG says, Stacy says, pronounced Chanukah? Hanukkah? Or is that Hanukkah? Is that like a with a at the back of the throat? Hanukkah? And she's, written it in Hebrew, but I haven't got a clue how to read those characters. And VG says, I'm surprised to see the wood in the flame. It's not charred. That's because at that point the wood hasn't actually. I mean, it's literally off the strike of the. You've got the matches and it's just come off, so it's still flaring up on the tip of the match. So the wood itself hasn't had a chance to catch fire yet. That's why. So great takeaway from me personally, says VG. I love photographing lamps and flames. Right. Okay. Cool. So let's move on to the. All right, hang on. Robert's just said Hanukkah. Okay. Hebrew version. Right. Okay. It looks like there's going to be a little bit of debate going on in the comments there. The fact is, you all know what I mean. And maybe I should look it up. Yeah, I'll look it up on YouTube later. I should get one of these audio files. Right. Okay, also, Greg's saying that's a tough challenge for landscape photography. Exactly, Greg. Takes you out of your comfort zone. Just like the product photography takes me out of my comfort zone. I'm a portrait photographer. I don't do matches. I don't do baskets or steel hairs. I tend to stay indoors or in studios or kind of out in places where there's a little bit of a breeze and there aren't midges to take portraits. So yeah, that's part of it. I mean, yes, Greg, you know your landscapes are peerless. Your ones. In fact, actually, I should just say Greg's got another one up in the group Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. In the Facebook group, Greg's put up another picture of one of the tours up on Dartmoor, and once again has explained in detail the whys and the wherefores and the thought processes and the camera settings. Really worth a read. Go and take a look. Lots to learn from that. So thank you for doing that, Greg. But yes, I'm quite excited about the idea of pushing you out of your comfort zone. Yes, you can do landscapes. What else can you do? And I think you've got a lot of skills. You've got a lot of skills. You know how to use your camera, and you understand light and you understand composition. So the fun is now going to be, how do you apply it to something else? Now, if people scare the life out of you and you don't want to photograph people, photograph symbols, photograph objects, what can you do with a pine cone, or Christmas bauble and the reflections in it? I think you could come up with something really interesting, Greg. So the challenge is there, and I don't want you chickening out. I want to see what you can do for me. Not for me, for everybody. This is the point, is that put the images in and we'll all become a bit inspired by what everybody else is up to. If you really run into problems, then fine, stick in the problem photo and ask me about it next week. So, okay, smiley face from Maya, who's in Israel, who will know exactly how to say Hanukkah, 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 Hanukkah. I'm just hoping I'm not being heretical or blasphemous by saying it wrong. Okay, so let's move on to the critique section now then. And where shall we start? Okay, actually let's start with VG then. So yesterday VG sent me a bunch of photos saying today in Chennai, which would have been yesterday, southern part of India, we celebrate Karthi Gai. Car as in car, thi as in thin, guy as in guy. Right. So rows of lamps and the designs made out of flowers and flower, as in FLOUR, are done today, and the theme behind is driving darkness away from our lives by lighting earthenware lamps with oil and fire. It's fitting as we're going through a dark period, hence I took some special effort towards decoration of flowers and lamps. The breeze was strong today and it was tough as I had to keep lighting, focus and click. So some quick shots to try and capture the essence of the festival. I think again back to the initial lessons you taught us on how to capture flames without the photography turning out too noisy. But I did not have the time I wished for the capture. It was windy and tough to manage single-handed. Tried to capture the essence. For the critique section, I would love to hear how the photo should have been taken. I switched off all the lights and also took some with the lights on. So, okay, won't go through all the photos. I'll show you a couple of these then. Let's flip over here. So here you can see here we've got a flower, looks like a rose, and with oil, the wick, the flames coming around in this wonderful thing. Now there's pretty damned amazing setup. We've got two bits here. We've got the one on the floor where we've got all these flowers around. We've got all the flowers, the lamp. That'll be that bit on the top that we were just looking at. We can also see stuff going on in the background as well. You can see a slightly ajar door. So is that where part of the draft and wind is coming through? Here's the one at the back. So VG said flowers and flour. So we've got the flower, the roses, and we've got the flour that you bake with, and various bits of colouring or fruit or seeds or spices. I'm not totally sure. I'm sure VG will be writing in the comments in a moment to say what that is as well. But the arrangements are quite spectacular. I mean, really, the sense of time, energy, and effort just in creating these is astounding. Just don't have anything quite like that in the UK. Not in kind of not the upbringing that I had at any rate. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And here's looking from above a bit. Obviously, this one was then taken with the light on. We can see more of the floor and light off. Much more of a glow, not quite in focus, but then I think VG told me that when she emailed me the images, said to ignore the focus. And these are some of the edited versions. So you can see the kind of the images that we've got then. And really, what we're up against here is there's the Festival of Carthagai going on. There's these incredible arrangements of flowers and flour and spices and oil lamps and flames and light. And I can imagine just being there, seeing it, smelling it, feeling, the almost the warmth of the. Mind you, you're in a much warmer country, so I don't suppose the little flames are warming you up so much. You'd feel the warmth if you're in Scotland from a couple of candles. But it looks magical. I can imagine it being a very magical experience. The problem then comes is you go, how do I capture this? I want to be able to capture this with the camera. And really, I think you're kind of up against it, because in a way, to capture it, you wouldn't start at this point. What I mean by that is, okay, there's essentially two different ways I would go about this. I mean, okay, let's flick back. You see what you've got here? You've got this on a tiled floor. Let's take a look at this photo. This is one of your unedited ones, but it shows you where it's placed. But it also shows the essential problem that you have. If you're trying to capture everything here, you've also got something like a bookcase and a doorway that are getting in the way. You've got walls which are, not necessarily how you would want them. So if you were trying to create something which would be like a magazine style photo, or something you would want to have as a poster, or something, really quite amazing. And although I've not seen them before, I can imagine there are probably some Indian photographers who obviously grow up and live with this, breathe this, who then have studios. And the studios, you would then create huge white spaces or even huge black spaces, so that you wouldn't actually have the interference of any other elements. You would essentially create a studio, a full large studio environment. One thing that sort of strikes me is this one, for example. I think, if you were to be on a step ladder right above it, shooting down, and then creating something almost perfectly symmetrical. But then again, you would want a kind of a plain white or a plain black background, but capturing bits and pieces. I think that would be interesting. I quite like the way that you've got the glow creating shadows off the edges here around it. Yeah, there's so much, there's so many details that you could get into. I mean, it's another thing with macro camera, you get in and take part of the details, get the texture of the flowers. Do you remember that shot that you put in for was it on the Rain Challenge? With the water on the leaf that you did, VG, a few weeks ago. That kind of close-up thing, the detail shots. I can imagine beautiful detail shots in the flowers. You get some fantastic macro shots, or with the oil burners as well, or the mix of the oil burners and the flowers. But you could also get the symmetrical shape by shooting from literally directly above. Difficulty with that is always, if you're standing above it on a ladder, is not getting the ladder in the way, in which case you then have to lean outwards quite some, in which case the whole thing has a possibility of falling over, so you have to have somebody else hold the ladder. There are all sorts of technical logistics that get in the way for doing that kind of thing. There's also the idea that if you did have a sort of essentially an infinity space, so that it was a black floor with a black wall in the background, or a white floor with a white floor in the background, you could get low and you could do that kind of angle, but you wouldn't have to worry about other things being in the way or getting caught into the shot. So, one way is essentially you have the studio space. If you don't have the studio space, the other ways around it are things like the close-ups, the macro shots. And then the other way around it is actually one of the things I was alluding to, or not alluding to, I actually said out loud about celebration photos, which is the people, the reaction to. Now, again, I don't know the festival, the way that you react to it, but with most festivals, and I think I get the impression from you, what you've talked about where you are in India as well, very populated place, festivals and celebrations are something which happen when people come together, rather than necessarily a solitary thing. So I suppose a bit like if you're shooting, if you would say photographing a birthday cake, you can photograph the cake, you can photograph the candles on the cake, you can photograph somebody blowing out the candles, you can photograph people looking on in expectation as somebody's blowing out the candles. You can take the photo of people applauding or cheering or smiling as the candles are blown out and the smoke is coming up. You can take a photo of somebody cutting the cake. You can take a photo of the cake being eaten as well. So you can see that it's not just about the cake and the candles, it's about, you can do a whole thing about the reaction to it as well. And I suppose when you're creating something like this, what I have no idea of, because I haven't been brought up in your culture, is the interaction with this. Now, for you, it might be really obvious. For me, it isn't. That's part of the wonder. It's the speciality that you've got, VG, over me, is I know virtually nothing about Indian, Hindu, Southern Indian culture, festivals. It looks amazing. So I want you to show me more. I want you to give me a real sense of it. And these photos start to give me a real sense of the incredible time and energy and detail that goes into creating these things. But I have no idea about the context. So, another idea is now, whether it's your parents, or I know you say live with you, or Manoj's daughter, or a few friends, or just the family together, whatever it is, what's the context of it? So it's a difficult, I don't know that I can give you, it's not so easy for me to say, well, crop it here and, edit it this way. Because I think the kind of photos you're after, VG, really require either a different setup. It doesn't look like you've got the space to really kind of create something whereby the surrounds aren't getting in the way, or the surrounds become part of the photo. It becomes more documentary in that sense, less about light and line and more about emotion and activity. So within any setup that you've got with a photo, we're nearly always working. We've got some things that could work in our favours, other things that are working against us. So you kind of have to work out, well, if I can't do it this way, what other ways can I do it? So I hope that gives you some kind of ideas. And then along with what I was talking about with the lighting the match, maybe that will sort of help sate you this evening for photography advice on light. But thank you for sending these images in, and I would love to know a bit more about this festival. Sounds beautiful. And I just absolutely adore the amount of effort that's gone into creating it. Fantastic. Thank you for sending those in, VG. Okay, let's flick back, see what we've got. Okay, great. Greg says, I'll see what I can do. Good, you're going to get involved. Brilliant. Love that. Maggie says, a grand challenge. My mind is a whirl. Love to see what you're going to come up with, Maggie. Becca says, I'm bursting with ideas for this challenge. Oh, lots of ideas then. Have lots of new material, but couldn't get it ready in time to submit for this week. Okay, that's fine. There's plenty more weeks to come. I've no plans on stopping this anytime soon, Becca. But yeah, great. Got some great ideas for the celebrations. That's good. VG says, bit blank now. After morning coffee will do. Well, yeah. I mean, you've got an excuse at 2 o'clock in the morning now we're at for you. And if all else fails, message Becca. She's got loads of them. Rosie says VG's floral arrangements are beautiful. Absolutely. Oh, VG says coloured flower. That's what it wasn't, spice or fruit. Right. Okay. Cool. Nice arrangement, VG, from Stacey. Born Cynic says, wonder how long it takes to create all that. Oh, and VG says 2 hours. Okay, thumbs up. Yeah, it's a couple of hours to create all that. I mean, I guess that must be, well, either it's a chore or it's a meditative experience, and I hope it's more a kind of meditative experience. The lights make the petal shapes around it stunning. Great idea, says Becca. And VG, or in response to my ladder, I'm scared of heights, even a step ladder. Fair enough. You don't have to do the step ladder thing. It's just a suggestion. And Stacey's similar. Robert says, I use a black king-size flat sheet to create the infinity space. Good for the floor, and they can be hung on the walls. Yeah, big black sheet. I've got fleece, actually. Just you buy the fleece sheets. So I've got white sheets and I've got black fleece. You go buy it off the roll from the drapery place. Suddenly I've forgotten the name of the word. Places that sell materials. 1.5 meters wide, and then as long as you want. And mine I've got, I think, 3 meters long and 1.5 meters wide. And the great thing about fleece is, unlike, say, a cotton sheet, which crumples, and you'll know this, Robert, if you've ever used white sheets, is you see all the wrinkles, and then if you're trying to sort of smooth it out in Photoshop afterwards, it's an absolute nightmare. Fleece doesn't seem to crumple. Fleece is absolutely great. And washable too, so I'd certainly recommend that one. Okay, VG says, thanks Kim, 3-day festival, we'll try one today. Okay, cool. Well, so okay, you can use that one then later for your celebration. See how you get on. Cool. Okay, what are we on to next then? Steadily working our way through. So that was VG. Now I think what we'll do next is let's go Lucas. Right. So Lucas said came in was his first post in. So let's put this up, flip over here, and he started off with, took this with an old Minolta beer can attached to my camera with an adapter, so all manual. So I wasn't totally sure what he meant by beer can, so I asked him to expand, and he said yes. So he's using a Sony A7 II. It's a full frame mirrorless camera, let's say not the newest one. By a beer can he meant an old Minolta tongue-tied or what tonight? Minolta 70 to 210 lens, basically a big lens. It's called a beer can because essentially it's sort of about the size and shape of a beer can. Now, he only had a very basic adapter, so he couldn't use the autofocus and auto functions. And that's one of the things. You can quite often get a lot of old lenses really cheap to shove onto your cameras, and they'll fit, except for the fact, or you can get adapters for them, except for the fact that it doesn't have the electronics of your modern DSLR, so you have to do everything manually. But if you're wanting to sort of expand out on your lens collection fairly cheaply, and you're quite happy to do everything manually, then that's certainly something you can do. So he wasn't able to do this. Anyway, he played with the image, and what he noticed when he was struggling, he loved the weather conditions. You could see the light, like the way the light was falling onto the cityscape. Looked like it was going to rain, however some parts were still sunny. I was trying to capture that wonderful splash of light that was falling on the buildings, but he wasn't happy with the sharpness of it. And is there a way to improve it in Photoshop? It's quite intimidating software. Thank you for your help. Okay, so primarily what this is about is a sharpening thing. Now, at the moment, from here, as we look at this, I'm looking at this on a 24-inch screen. I don't know what you might be looking at this on your phone or your tablet, smaller screen. It kind of looks okay. It doesn't look, you don't have to worry too much about sharpness. But there comes a point though, is if you are looking at it bigger, you'll start to notice. So if I zoom in on this, we can see the buildings, we can see the windows in the buildings. There's a softness to the edges though, where we notice it, if we particularly notice up on the where the building, the cranes are up on top of the building, is particularly softer. Now, so is there anything we can do about that? Now, let's open with Photoshop. Now, the thing is with Photoshop, there's a dozen different ways to do pretty much anything. But what we find is quite often the most obvious one isn't what tends to work. So first, I'll tell you what we'll do first of all. Let's just crop this. He did already have this cropped, pretty much something like this, I think, where a little bit kind of rule of thirds, where we've got kind of the top third is darker sky, maybe with that little bit of cloud and the light coming through there. The bottom third is the buildings. So we'll just crop in there to give pretty much what he had. And then he sort of played with the contrast a little bit as well. However, what I want to do first, I'll just copy that layer. Let's zoom in, and so that's at 100%, and we'll use these tops of the buildings as our little test part. Now if I go up to filter, I can go down and there's a bunch of things saying sharpen, and then I can hit sharpen, and I do that and virtually nothing happens. There's not a lot of difference. It's very slight, but what's also happened, if I repeat that filter and then repeat it again, you can now actually see it's become very, very bitty, noisy, and not very pleasant really. So I'll undo those, and we'll not muck around with we'll not do the sharpen. There's another option here where you can go in and play with the sharpen a little bit more. You've got things like sharpen edges, where it just goes for the edges but not for the middle part. You can sharpen, smart sharpen, where it decides you can start moving some of these things about. Now you can see that certainly sharpens it up, becomes very overcooked. You can take it down. This is going to it's quite slow, but let's drag that up and then click OK. But again, what we've got is it's kind of noisy in a way, and this is what I found with all of them. Whenever I use pretty much any of the sharpen filters, just kind of created quite an ugly aspect to them that I didn't really like. So playing around with this, if you've got Photoshop, I'm presuming if you've got a new enough version, it's not a very old version, that built into it is Camera Raw. And one of the things I found actually is if I go to filter Camera Raw, in the end, part of the sharpen you're wanting is about creating a little bit more contrast. Now, straightforwardly, let's sort of zoom in a bit here. Just moving the contrast button maybe makes the sky a little bit more interesting, but it darkens down the buildings, and it's not really making anything stand out much more. But what we do have is the texture and the clarity buttons. And what I would say, well, what I would also notice is, first of all, when you come in close, oops, I didn't mean to drag that bit. One of the other things you'll notice is there's this sort of green lines and red lines. This is chromatic aberration. It happens with the lens. That essentially what happens is a bit like when you look at the edge, corner of a mirror or something. It sort of splits the light, and you tend to find on one edge it goes very green, on one edge it goes very red, or sometimes it can kind of greeny blue and sort of reddy purple. Now, in Photoshop RAW, there is an option for playing with that. If I go to Optics, there's a defringe option. So there's a purple amount and a green amount. Well, the green amount is greeny blue. So if I drag that over up to here, and then I'll just move that. You can see when I get to about here, let's just open that a little bit wider, that green disappears. So the green's disappeared there, and then likewise the purple bit, if I drag that, this is more red, so I need to move this over into the red a bit, and there we go, the red's disappeared. So we've got rid of that green and purple. That's one thing, because every sharpen thing we did before actually increased that going on. So that's just a little thing with the defringe. Play with that, Lucas. But to go back to the texture and the clarity, if I take the texture and I kind of pull it up a bit, or I take the clarity and I pull it up a bit, now you see you're getting a little bit more. Now it is getting noisier. You can slightly offset that by go to the detail and noise reduction. Now the noise reduction in turn softens it, so it kind of blurs it a bit. So you're trying to find that balance between sharpening and softening. But the thing is that you can reduce the noise a bit, which, although it is blurring, again, if we go back to the basics, the fact is, because we play with the texture and it is standing out a bit more. So now if I click OK, do you see the difference then between that's the original? And so what we've got is we can now feel that, that crane is standing out much more, but also so is the definition within the buildings as well. So the buildings have now got much more definition around them. The sky has too. So a straightforward contrast adjustment was kind of too broad. But the texture and the clarity, I think those are the sliders in Photoshop that you want to play around with. And then within this, you could then play with different areas as well. So for example, if we wanted to, I'll do a very, very quick selection. Say I wanted to just select the sky like that. So we've got the sky and not the buildings. And then what I want to do, I take the curves and maybe I could darken that down a bit and create that sky as a bit more dramatic, something like that. What I could also do is I could select, where's the selection tool gone? Select the sky again, but invert it, selection inverse. So now we've just got the buildings, and maybe what I want to do with the buildings is lighten them up a bit. So again, I could just very quick take a curves, brighten up the buildings a little bit, and then we overlay the darker sky, and you've now got something, very dramatic. Now, the edge of this isn't absolutely perfect, and this is certainly overcooked. I just wanted to kind of show you what you can do. You can obviously get a lot more subtle about it than that. I mean, even something like this, you can take that and just slide it down a little bit as to how strong or otherwise you want. So I hope that helps, Lucas. I would say go in and play with the texture, texture and the clarity sliders as much as anything else, as well as the sharpen, really. And that might give you the area for you to kind of get what it is I think you're chasing. So I hope you find that useful. Right. Okay. How are we doing? Oh, Robert says we'll check the upholstery shop. Upholstery, that'll do. VG says looks very dramatic after editing. Okay, cool. Right, next up then. Oh, hang on. Greg said I use the sharpen tool in Lightroom and increase the masking so it applies to just the edges. Then this will not add noise globally to the whole image. Yeah, it's about selecting the area that you want to sharpen. That's true. That's true. Okay. So next up, Stacy. So Stacy sent. Let me find Stacy's picture. So this is the photo Stacy sent, and she said, in the same area that I took the mill is a small township in Salisbury called Lumberton. There's some small inns that people stay at when visiting, and there's another bridge that crosses the Delaware River from Pennsylvania to New Jersey. It's mainly as a walking bridge. Now, I took your advice and took it from an angle to give it room, or as much as I can, because there's a hill and a canal on the way stopping me going further back. Of course, the patriotic American flag was waving because it was a little bit on the windy side. I know it was a gloomy fall day, unfortunately, but I do try and get out every Sunday and it can be a bit hit or miss. Saw tourists walking across the bridge, looking out on the river. And I know it's got a gloomy skies, but did I give this enough room? I took your advice about giving it some space on the bottom area and making it equal to the top. How did I do? Well, I think the thing is here, Stacey, is essentially, it feels like it's kind of too tilted. Now, you might have heard me talking before about I like a straight horizon. Now I can see what you've actually done here, Stacey, is you've essentially leveled with the base. I can see the little plants sticking up here, which means what you've done is you've aligned it with the edge of the river, the embankment. But what that's done is it's tilted everything else. So the bridge and the stands of the bridge and the horizon and the trees and everything just feels like the whole thing is falling over to one side. And so you sent me the original, this one, and here we can see that very much that you've aligned it with the base. But what I'll keep wanting to do is turn it. So quite simply, drag this into Photoshop a sec, and really what I want to do is that. I want to line it up straight. Now, it turns out you then actually sent me another photo which was where it was turned straight, which is this one. And to be honest, I think you're off to a better start with this, Stacey, because what's important here is to have the uprights. You need a level horizon. So with this, we are almost there. And I would say really what you need to do is this just needs tilting just a fraction more so we get a sense of the uprights. The straight up goes with the uprights of the bridge, and the horizon is going with, in this case, with the embankment on the other side. So that gives us a slightly better sense, fiddling about by micro movements. And then from here, you can come in, you can lower this down, if you were again doing basic rule of thirds, so you've got about a third of the sky, the bridge is running through it. You can come up here, take the river to be about the bottom third. Now, this bridge is coming to almost 2/3 of the way across. I think you could just tuck that in a little bit here, let it cross over into the sort of centre of the other part here. Just bring that down a little bit more. And I think actually then, at that point, that gives you a much more comfortable picture. There's still plenty of room for the bridge to breathe. You've still got sky above, you've still got river below. You've got the bridge coming all the way into the picture, so you get drawn into it. So compositionally, I think it works much better like this. If you really wanted to, you could Photoshop out the corner here, but I don't think you particularly need to. That just shows you that you're on an embankment, and that's which you kind of expect. And then from here, at this point, you could then go in and do your basic editing. So, for example, we just get a little bit of vignette, and then alter the colours, a little bit of clarity, maybe a bit more vibrance, something very, very roughly like that, and that gives it that little bit more punch. So, but yes, you're right. I mean, it's a dull day. It would be nice to see it. Nice if you get there when there's beautiful colours in the sky. Just sunset or just after even. But in terms of composition, I think you've got to it needs to be upright. I think that having everything tilted over to the side just kind of feels a bit wrong. To make sure that you're kind of aligned, so the vertical, because these are strong verticals which the bridge is hanging on, don't tip them to the left or the right, because then it feels like the bridge is falling over. So I hope that helps, Stacey. Right, close that, flip back, and right, okay, so next up, what have we got? Okay, let's go on to Anne, I think. So what have we got? So we've done Lucas, we've talked about Greg's pictures, Stacey, VG, we'll do Anne, and then we'll do Cliff. Right. Excuse me. Okay, so where's Anne's gone? Okay, Stacey said that's helped. That's good. Glad that has. So Anne sent me, well, there's the edited and the unedited. So this is Anne's edited version, and then this is the original. And what she says is, I liked the texture and shadows in the photo, but I did not like the muddy browns that were so prevalent in the original. I tried black and white to emphasize the texture, and this is where we go to there, but it seems so flat. I also think I missed the mark on the composition. Do you have any crop or colour enhancement suggestions? Right. Okay. So you're there, you've got the light coming through the trees, you create getting patterns, both reflections and shadows falling on the water. If this was Scotland in the summer, it would be a haven for the midges. Don't know what it's like for the mosquitoes where you are. There's lots of beautiful textures all around there. Textures in the branches and the roots, particularly the roots really, more than the branches, and sort of the mud down the side there. So I can see where you're coming from, and you then sort of saying about capturing. You capture it, but as you say, that it's not really necessarily got the kind of, it is kind of muddy browns. Of course, when you're standing there, you've still got the blue of the sky through the trees, you've got the light dappling, you've got all the other things and senses going on. So it feels much richer than you're experiencing it. Or rather, you're experiencing it much richer than you're seeing it through the camera. The camera isn't capturing that. So what you then did was you converted it to black and white. But this black and white looks very flat. Now, what I'm going to talk about here, I think, is the part of the reason for this is that there's several different ways you can do black and white, and it looks to me like the way you did black and white, which was probably just desaturate, is the least interesting of all of them. If anything, you can use it as a starting point, but it's no good in and of itself. So let me show you what I mean with this then. So we'll open this in Photoshop. Just close Stacey's picture there. Now, if I go to hue saturation and just desaturate, then we end up, it's not bad, but it's not maybe got the depth that we wanted it to have. Now, another option is, there's an interesting thing called channels. If you click on the picture, you can go to channels, and the channels split things into red, green and blue. A bit like if you were having filters over your camera lens. And the red creates this, the green creates that, and the blue creates that. And do you see that they're all giving a slightly different feel to the black and white? So just starting there, you can quite often, do you want, so with the blue here, all the greens are looking much, much darker. With the greens are all looking much, much lighter, and the red, they're sort of somewhere in between. So you can immediately decide whether you want to choose. Now this one tends to make it a bit more oppressive at the top, but the shadows become a little bit deeper on the water. I think there's more texture in the water, and if we go to the reds, the shadows have virtually disappeared. And on the green, that's sort of somewhere in between. So there's a little bit going on here. It's depending on to which one you want to really emphasize or draw out. I mean, this green one I think has got quite a bit of texture. So if I just copy that and then come back here and paste, you can see that that gives a different sense to, if I go back to that hue saturation, desaturate it. That was just straightforwardly desaturated. That's the green. So we've got a different sense of something going on. Another way you can do it is in Photoshop. There is the where are we? Black and white. There is actually a black and white filter where you've got sliders, and you can see down here in the bottom right corner here I've got sliders, and what I can do is I can take the reds and I can make the reds brighter or darker. Now we didn't see much red, but actually there's reddish sort of bits in the mud, so you can see it's sort of, we kind of in the shadows really, you kind of become brighter there, darker down there. The yellows, it's much more yellow about here. We can make it much darker, much brighter. The greens, obviously very similar to the yellows. Cyan, not a lot of cyan, a little bit over on the right there. Blues, tiny bit over in the sort of far right in the corner. And the magentas, there's pretty much nothing there. So you can play with really, you can get a little, bring the reds down, get a little bit more of that shadow. Yellow, make the leaves brighter or somewhere in between. The greens, again, you can make the leaves brighter but without necessarily attacking the shadows in the foreground, which I quite like these. If I bring that yellow down, I quite like these shadows on the water here. I think that's a lovely bit of texture, which you lose if you put the yellows too high. But then you can lighten up the tree leaves again back a bit more with the green. So that gives you something to play with, and that's quite different from that one, which was just the green filter, or that where are we? That which was the desaturation. So that's another way you can play with it. A third way, a very quick way that I very often do for black and white, is to use the gradient map. As long as you've got the colours over on your left here set to black and white, then if you go to gradient map, it will automatically create. It will take the lightest part and make them white, and the darkest part and make it black, and it will just do the gradient of black and white in between. In this case though, what happens is it's made it way too dark into the shadows. So I think really something like the black and white playing around with the sliders has given us the most interesting. Another option, again I'll just duplicate that layer, is if we go into Camera Raw, where once again I think we have you can play, well, yeah, there's color mixers and things like that. But if actually, I'll tell you what, if you go here and we just take that into monochrome, what you can also do, whilst it's again fairly flat, you can play around with those texture and clarity things, or you can, to make the highlights brighter or bring the highlights down. We can bring a bit more detail out of the shadows. Now, you do that, that seems to have flattened it even more, making the shadows lighter and the highlights darker, has just moved everything in the middle. But by doing that, it then means if you come to the clarity button, you can now really ramp that up to add in extra, and a little bit more texture. So you can get the contrast going. So that became, although maybe that's just a bit too busy. I think for my, this is probably the one that I like the best, is where we played with the black and whites and we lowered the reds, lowered the yellows, but pushed up the greens. You can then add a gradient map over the top of that to emphasize that a little bit more if you wanted. So the thing is, Anne, is to really, when you come to sort of converting to black and white, you're going to black and white because what you're loving is the textures. Maybe the colours aren't doing much for you, so it's the tones and the textures and the shapes and the lines that you're really wanting to emphasise. Those become more important than the colour. And it's to understand that when you go to black and white, that there's a whole number of different options that you can take. So if you've got Photoshop, play with the channels, play with the black and white sliders, play with the gradient map. Very often I find the gradient map gives me what I want straight away. If it doesn't, that's when I start turning to the others. And if you've got Camera Raw, and you can start taking down highlights, bringing up shadows, emphasizing texture. And then of course you can also mask off areas as well. So you could do one kind of adjustment for the water area, a different kind of adjustment for the leaves in the background, and another kind of adjustment for the roots on the left, for example. How far you want to go largely comes down to your level of obsession and patience and experimentation, and how important the photo is to you as well. You know, if you go, well, it was just a quick snapshot, it's not worth that much trouble, or you say, this place is so special to me, I really want to nail this. And that's your decision. But that hopefully gives you a whole bunch of different options to play with. Okay, well, thanks for sending that through, Anne. Hope that helps. Right, where are we? Becca says it really enhances the reflection in the water. Yeah, so particularly when you take that red slider down, I think that's, you know, you wanted to have that texture in the main part of it. Okay, so right, Anne has, this is fantastic info, several great techniques to practice. Oh, I'm glad you found that useful. I will just say there is a delay of somewhere between about 10, 15, possibly 20 seconds between what I'm doing and then what happens on Facebook itself. So you write something, I don't see it straight away. It's about 10 or 15 seconds later before it turns up, if I happen to be looking at the screen, that is. Cool. Right, so last one I want to talk about before we get to the end game, and maybe a little bit about next week, is to talk about Cliff. So Cliff, don't know whether you're still here, whether you managed to sit through, whether you're... but yes, we're now going to talk about that photo of your wife, and I hope you will still be friends with me at the end of it. Anne said, I went back a few weeks later and the browns had a nice red hue. Yeah, well, that becomes even more interesting in this game. Well, so whether you want to play more with the colour or whether you again want to play with the textures. Right, so Cliff, so let me see. Cliff sent through a photo. He's got a couple of versions of the crop. So let's flick through here. So we've got this edit, we've got this edit, and we've got the original. Excuse me. So what Cliff said was, hi Kim, as you know from our conversations on another platform, I've been catching up on previous episodes before becoming active. So yeah, quite amazingly, Cliff seems to have been going back through all the previous episodes, and given that there's 34 previous ones to tonight, I'm very impressed. This is a photo of my wife, which we both rather like, and a version of it hangs on our wall, which is great. But we are both emotionally attached to it. I see it as a holiday snap rather than a portrait, simply because it was shot from the hip on a bridge camera. But I still say I've captured something. I know exactly what you mean from previous episodes, as when I look at this picture I remember the delicious sea bass that we had that evening, the impending sunset, the sound of the ocean. I'd like to hear your critique without the emotional attachment that I have, and perhaps see if you would have edited it differently. Also, I'd like to know your thoughts and opinions on candid portraits, not street photography. I think the bottom line I'd like to know from a pro portrait photographer, apart from critique, is, faced with a similar situation, would you take the candid shot or the direct or direct the subject? Okay. Couple of different things going on here then. So what we've got is Cliff is on holiday with his wife at the restaurant. Very good sea bass by all accounts. She's sitting there. He's got bridge camera with him. Takes the shot. Feels he's got something. Feels quite happy with it. And then edits it a bit. And these are two alternative edits with it. Now, so one part of it is, could he have done anything else with the editing? The other part of it is, which is particularly interested in, is about the difference with a portrait when you're, is it better to try and capture somebody when they have to be looking off? The candid photo, the idea that you're taking a photo that isn't posed or feels like you're just capturing somebody naturally, or the photo where somebody's looking directly into the lens. Now, that whole thing about looking off to one side or looking into the lens as a really powerful thing, and I will come on to that. I'll come on to that in a minute. But first of all, I'll just talk a little bit about the editing. Editing is kind of up to you. One of the things that I noticed with this is that you've desaturated the whole picture quite a lot. And I suppose if we go back to your original, what we notice is it's very red. Now, was she really that sunburnt, or has the camera auto settings just sort of shifted everything out? It also looks like maybe, you know, there's a kind of soft gold light falling on her. This could be perhaps evening, sun getting low in the sky. But what it does mean is that I'm sure she wasn't quite as lobster red as that. So when you've gone to edit it, you've thought, oh, this looks a bit too much. And so what you've done is you've desaturated it. But what that has done is it sort of desaturated everything. So if we open this one in Photoshop, and okay, well, let's just do a little bit more of a kind of slightly standard portrait crop, which I think is the first kind of version you did. So we don't need it. We don't need, that bit to the left, and we don't need that bit above. We can kind of, but then we've also got a bit of glass in the corner. Maybe we can just sort of bring that back. Glass doesn't really matter, really. But yeah, so we'll crop in something like that. Doesn't really matter. You can play around with that a bit. The main thing now, though, is what you did next. And essentially, same saturation button that we were just talking to with Anne. If you take that and we desaturate it, that makes it a sort of soft black and white. But if you nudge it down a little bit, we take away some of that redness of the skin. And you've taken it to sort of something like about that level. But the problem is the whole thing has become kind of desaturated and it no longer really looks very natural. And at this point, what I would say is what you could do a little bit more of is sort of selectively desaturated. Now, in Photoshop, you've got this hue saturation. Now, if you grab the hue, you can turn them all sorts of colours. You can be purple and very kind of Star Trek, really, at this point. Go to the reds, and there's these little droppers down in the corner here. And if I take that dropper and I just click it on her skin, that will give us the range. So if I now start desaturating, you'll see it's desaturating the reds, but the green in the background is kind of staying there. Now it's also taking out a lot of the sort of the decking behind her. So what I would maybe do is shift this about a bit until I slide that over. If I slide that over to the right a bit, so we bring some of the reds back in, but not all of them. And now what we have is we've got some more of that colour in the decking back. We've still got some of the colour in her skin, but not so much of it. So we've gone from there. We can desaturate a bit, but not taking away all of the colour. And we've still managed to retain the colour of the background. So it sort of feels like you've taken down some of that sort of over sunburnt kind of look to it, but you haven't sort of got to the point whereby the whole thing feels like you've drained all the colour out of it. So that's really where I would play with it, to be honest, Cliff, is to sort of play around with it, but selectively cut, try and play around with the selection of the colour, of which bit you happen, so what you're trying to do here is not desaturate so much the reddy purples, but more the orangey reds a little bit. And then that allows you to sort of get rid of the sunburnt look. So I hope that helps. Another thing you can do with this, straightforwardly, picture, is you can black and white. I mean, if I just shove a quick gradient map on that, that's quite a lovely photo. I mean, I think, when you're going for, nice romantic photo, your wife, then, black and white can be, there's always something sort of slightly more artistic about black and white. We've then got, you might want to play around a little bit more in the corners. I mean, let's just take that a minute. Again, let's quickly go into camera raw. So at this point, if I just straightforwardly monochrome, again fairly flat at that point, and give it a little bit of vignette, darken the corners down a bit. That sort of takes a little bit away from the sky. But then when we go back to the basics, now if we go texture and clarity on this, what happens is it does horrible things to the skin. So you really don't want to do that. But because you're going for a kind of, you've got a slightly soft, dreamy look to this as well. Here you can play around with contrast. If you play with that contrast level a bit, the brights become a little bit brighter, the darks become a little bit darker, you get that little bit more texture, maybe up that a bit, play with that, maybe back a touch, something like that. And just by playing with that contrast, you then get a richer picture. Now, where did I get with it? Maybe just nudge that vignette a little bit more. And so, as opposed to a straightforward gradient map, we've now got something slightly warmer. It's still black and white, but it's not as harsh as that. When we, the stuff we did with Lucas and showing Anne as well, where you play with the texture and the clarity sliders, work fine for buildings and for roots and textures, but you don't want to do it with skin, not unless you're trying to age somebody, which isn't a good idea with your wife. All right, so that's that. Now the next thing is, and I think the important bit here, is where you talk about the notion of the candid shot versus the looking into the lens. Now, one of the things you said in this was actually it's a photo you both quite like, and in fact you've got a version of it printed on the wall. Now, to be able to get a photo of your wife that your wife is actually kind of okay about is a pretty rare thing. I've talked before, a few weeks back, a couple of months ago, about photographing Maggie. And the difficulty you have, that you see her one way, she doesn't necessarily see herself that way. Most people hate themselves in front of the camera. And one of the things about not looking into the camera is it's easier on the subject. The person themselves is less self-conscious if they're not having to look into the camera. The minute you look into the camera, you're aware the camera is staring at you, and you're aware that it can pick out all what you perceive as your faults. Doesn't matter if nobody else sees them as your faults. You feel they're your faults, and you feel like you don't have any control over the situation, and you get tense, and it starts to show. And instead of looking natural in front of the camera, you start to go a bit wide-eyed, and the mouth is smiling, but the eyes aren't, and it just looks bloody awful. So it's not a good look. Looking off to one side is a good way for photographing somebody when they don't particularly want to be photographed or feel uncomfortable about it. The other thing that's going on here is the side from which you've taken it. Because your wife is parting her hair on the other side of the face, it means that her hair is kind of half covering her face here. And that's something I've found through years of being a pro photographer, portrait photographer, is people are trying to hide in their photos because they don't like their face, because they don't like the way they're photographed. It becomes a bit of a shield. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if she feels slightly more comfortable with this photo because half her face is hidden. If you're wanting to create a slightly more flattering photo, you need to take her from the other side, because if the hair is half, you can see the hair is crossing the side. Whereas if she was turned the other way, the hair coming down and the hair on the other side would in fact frame her much more in a kind of oval shape, and I think that would be. Whereas at the moment, you've got this sort of strong triangle, and I'm sorry, I know you're going to hate me for doing this, because it's going to kind of mean that you don't look at the photo in quite the same way again. But in essence, you've created a shape of her face with a triangle like that. And what that does is it emphasizes the size of the jaw and narrows down where the eyes are. And generally speaking, a slightly more flattering kind of shape is where, if you imagine her hair, rather than being parted here, was parted here, so it was on the other side and then kind of came down there, then you would end up with a slightly more pointy or sort of inverted triangle, sort of egg shape if you like, but can't quite get it here. I would need to sort of look at a proper photo of it to show you, but I'm sure you can imagine what I mean. That is, in essence, you create a more oval face rather than an inverted, or rather than a sort of triangle shape. The inverted triangle is almost better. So she might prefer it because she's half hidden, but it's actually not necessarily the most flattering way to take a photo. You're better, if you're trying to capture a better sense of a person, you want to have them with more face in it. Now, this other thing about looking into the camera. When somebody is looking off to one side, you, looking at the photo, are an observer, a voyeur even. You are watching them and they are unaware that you are watching them. The moment somebody turns around and looks at the camera, now they are looking at you and you are aware that they are looking at you. And that changes the relationship with the person. You don't look at somebody the same way when you know they can see how you're looking at them. Now, another aspect of this is, the other thing is that when somebody's looking at you, then there is the eye contact, there is a connection. It's all part of the same thing, part of the same reason why you don't look at somebody in the same way. But there's a connection, and actually trying to get that connection, let me show you. Earlier today, I took a couple of selfies of me, just standard window light, right? So here we go. This is me, window to my left, to your right as you look at it. And I'm looking out the window. And at that point, you can be the observer. You can look at me, you can form your opinions in the safe knowledge that I've got no idea that you're doing it. You can be laughing at me, you can be looking wistful at me, you can be fancying me, you maybe only my wife. But the point is you can form whatever opinion, positive or negative, and I have no idea what that is. But what if I turn around and look at you? Now I can read your expression because I'm looking at you. So now, if your thoughts weren't entirely wholesome and pleasant, I might notice. So you have to change your expression. You react to this photo, you react to a face looking at you in a different way. And that's a really important thing to remember. However, it doesn't necessarily all have to be a negative thing. It doesn't have to, in this case, I've got a slightly warm smile on my face, or at least that's what I'm trying. And this is a connected photo. When you look at this photo, I am looking at you. There is a connection between us, or at least there feels like there is to the viewer, and that can be a much more interesting photo. Now, as a photographer, it's much harder to capture this kind of photo because you point the camera at somebody, and rather than giving you a relaxed, warm, connected, they give you because they don't really want to be photographed. And they were absolutely fine with you until the camera came up. They were connecting with you brilliantly until the camera was pointing at them. And this then is the problem. This is what you're up against. When you try to photograph somebody else, the hardest thing to do is to get a good photo of somebody looking at you. Now, if you're in the kind of amateur realms, you're in the uncertain realms, take the photo of them looking elsewhere. It's easier on them, it's easier on you. If you want the challenge, then you have to figure out how to get them to look at you and still look relaxed. And that's what I do. That's my challenge. That's my obsession. That's why I do portraits. Yeah, I can do portraits of people looking off to one side. Easy peasy. Photos of people looking at you but still relaxed? That's really difficult. Which is partly why I do it. It's my obsession. In the same way that Greg takes these amazing landscape photos, his obsession will have him being up before sunrise, driving off to some remote place, sitting on top of it, climbing to the top of a tor, sitting on a rock in cold weather, watching the sky lighten up. And I just think, oh God, no, I'd rather be in my bed. I love his photos, but I could never take photos like that because I don't have that obsession over landscapes. I have obsession over faces. So this is really what it's about, Cliff. That notion of, is it better to have the candid photo or is it better to have the pose or the looking into? And that kind of comes down to what you're obsessed about, what your skills are, and your relationship with the person that you're photographing, and their relationship with the camera, and your relationship with them and the camera, and how much you can relax them in front of the camera. Because your job then is not just taking the photo. Your job is not necessarily, you can understand everything you want about aperture, shutter speed, ISO, compositional techniques. But if you can't relax that person the other side of you, you don't have a photo. So a lot of my portrait photography, I'm not so much a photographer as a psychotherapist, as a counsellor, helping people to relax and feel better about themselves in front of the camera. And it's a skill I've had to develop over years. And some people never manage it because that's just not really their thing. So portrait photographers, we tend to be a rare bunch. Most photographers quite like hiding behind the camera. I would guess quite strongly that a large amount of the photographers watching I'm talking to you. You use the camera so that nobody else can use it. Is that right? I'm sure it is for a lot of you. The reason, well, not the reason, one of the reasons, a side benefit at least, of you holding the camera means nobody else is holding it, which means they can't point it at you, right? Most photographers aren't really taking photos of people, because then, as well as trying to work out all your composition and your light and everything else, you've then also got to deal with the emotions of the person that you're trying to take the photo of as well. And specifically, or particularly, if it happens to be your wife or partner, there's a whole minefield there for getting it wrong. So most people run away from doing that. So kudos to you for getting a photo of your wife. Even more kudos for getting a photo of your wife that she likes as well as you like. So that's in the bag. You've got the smug points, okay? But if you're talking about what you need to do to go pro from that, then you need to take it from the other side so that you've not got the inverted triangle. You need to be able to see the eyes. And the eye that's closest to the camera is always the most important one. That one's got to be in focus. That's the one in your picture which is hidden by the fringe, or the hair rather. And ideally, there's a whole skill set to be learned about relaxing people in front of the camera. But hopefully, then that gives you. But don't let that take away from the fact that you managed to take a photo of your wife which you both like, which is bloody astonishing and very rare. So anyway, I hope that gives you some pointers, some thoughts, along with that idea of how to, if you're going to taking some of the red out of the skin, but without desaturating the whole photo. Cool. Right. What a packed night we had this evening. I'll close those. Come back here. What else have we got here? Okay. So. And VG says, wonderful session, Kim, good night, friends. Cliff, selective colour reduction is a good tip, thanks, well, I'm glad that worked. VG says, black and white edit is classy. Yeah, well, always play around with black and white when you're doing portraits, so again, it's a nice shortcut. Cliff, I'd have photographed the other side. If I'd photographed the other side, she'd have seen me coming. Yeah, well, absolutely, you're doing your best, you can. Okay, Stacey's taking the dog out for a walk and disappearing early. Andy says, oh yes. Bourne says, definitely. And Rosie says, no one would dare take my camera. Yeah. Wouldn't take your camera or take your photo, not unless you might take your photo if you've got your camera smack bang over your face. Is that right, Rosie? Cool. What a great fun night. Great set of comments. Went on longer than I intended. I was desperately going to try and keep this to an hour and a half. I'm afraid we're up to an hour 50 already. So next week then, the challenge. Don't forget the challenge. Oh, something else I keep forgetting to say as well, which is if you're finding this useful, buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. Not compulsory, but always appreciated as a way to help support these podcasts. But meanwhile, next week, the celebration challenge. Interpret that how you wish. Get the photos to me by the weekend if you can. I will get an event page up on Facebook in the next day or two. And if you've got questions in the meantime, feel free to ask them. Okay, look forward to seeing you next week. Invite your friends as well. Okay, take care. Bye-bye. And where do we go? There we go.